Good evening, morning, afternoon, night, whenever you find it most convenient to join us at the Bonfire. I, as always, am Alan, the pole with a goal. And that goal is to just finish this degree, because it's getting to me. As always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host, DJ.
I am currently laughing at the internet looking for a porno.
That's okay. as well as Tim.
We're a very professional organization, and that's just really coming out right now.
Yeah,
I will laugh if anyone gets that reference. I'm going to laugh. I hope many people do because it's the funniest thing on the internet right now.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't get the reference, but that's
neither did I. So we're just gonna let you roll.
Maybe there's someone who gets it. Someone. Maybe it's Jonathan Kane that gets it. Shout out Jonathan Kane for. As like the guys that told me to shout out Jonathan Kane was there, and he's like, "Hey, we listened all through it and we heard it. Thank you." So Jonathan King gets another shout out. And of course, shout out to the people that come up to us at the games and to share their support. It's genuinely it really helps. Genuinely, it always puts a smile on my face, and it reminds me why I do this. So thank you. And if you ever see a guy wearing a green jersey and playing a saxophone, you should come say hi.
Or you can say hi to me or DJ whenever DJ is here, not in the land of gators.
There's currently a gator outside my door, so this does make sense.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I echo what you said, Alan. Genuinely, we really appreciate anyone that is deciding to, out of all the things they could be listening to right now, listening to us, that is really meaningful.
Yes, listening to Men in Red 97 podcast, whether it's us with the Bonfire or our friends over at Hot Takes. So, we're going to get right into it because we have a decent amount of news. So we just want to get through all that first. So let's just jump right into it. The first, and I think probably one of the biggest is that a word? Pieces of news. What's the plural of news? News. That dropped over the week. This happened on the Wednesday before the Atlanta game. The Bears have announced and showed renderings of a new stadium on the lakefront this time. Instead of Arlington Heights, they showed renderings of a new, $7 billion stadium that would be essentially in the place of where the South Lot and the Waldron Deck are. So if you've been to Fire games or know where those two areas are, just imagine a big stadium in that location. The renderings also show, of course, the question is what's going to happen to Soldier Field. They showed that the only thing that would be left are the Roman columns and the steps there. The area where the field and where the seats would be torn down, and it would be essentially turned into parks. Essentially, I remember seeing renderings of a baseball diamond, some trees there. I mean, first of all, it would be a lovely photo shoot there. Just imagine a huge park area with the Soldier Field columns behind us. I mean, that's
it looks raised, so that makes me think that they're planning on expanding the north deck, which already kind of goes under the colonnades. Yeah, and that's
I remember reading that the parking lot that's underneath Soldier Field would be also expanded upon that. So yeah, and one of the things, like I mentioned, it would be about $7 billion, and the Bears want some taxpayer help. So it wouldn't be funded mostly by the team. It would be by taxpayers, by Illinois or Chicago, Cook County residents. I don't know specifically.
Mostly, so most of it would come from a 2% tax that already exists on every hotel room, basically in Chicago.
Yes, I now just saw that point in the WGN article. Backed by the same 2% hotel tax used to build Guaranteed Rate Field, as well as to renovate Soldier Field. So that'd be interesting. This, of course, comes in the long saga of Chicago stadium news. We mentioned many episodes back that the White Sox are looking to relocate to the 78 development area in the South Loop off of Roosevelt. The Red Sox have also voiced that they too would like to be included in stadium talks. I think they're looking to get out of Bridgeview and into the city as well. So there's a lot of a lot of stadium movement, but that would cost a lot of money. And I know, as we've mentioned, and as the articles have mentioned, Governor Pritzker he's not too keen about this.
Yeah, and Joe Chats also got a statement out of the Fire, basically saying that they're aware of the rapidly evolving stadium situation in Chicago and are keeping their options open, basically, which is a statement, I guess. It doesn't really say a lot.
It is a statement in the history of statements.
Yeah. A statement, but does it have meaning? I ask you. So yeah, and like the push comes to shove is that there's basically not enough money for both the Bears and the White Sox to be getting money from the same fund. There was discussion about this tax going away at one point because it essentially raises the cost of hotel rooms, which obviously affects the amount of money that tourists spend when they're like the cost of coming on a trip to Chicago, and especially like the business and like the business convention business, which has been hurting in Chicago because of high costs anyways. So that has been a concern, just like the costs associated with coming to Chicago for those things. And obviously maintaining that tax for longer would be a negative in terms of that.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I feel like neither team, the White Sox or the Bears, can like justify it, especially with in terms of like on-field performance. They especially like right now. Well, I mean, maybe not the Bears. Like the Bears have something cooking, especially after the last draft. White Sox, not so much. I mean, that's definitely why it's like, you know, you guys aren't doing too well. Why do you guys need new stadiums? So
yeah, there's that. It's also just like, I mean, you're talking about billionaire owners and millionaire players and like that whole discussion. You know, like, is that the best use of taxpayer money? Like, it seems like not. So we'll see. But Friends of the Parks also sued to stop the Lucas Museum basically on the same location a decade ago. Yeah. And they've indicated that even though the Bears tried to play this off like the new, basically turning Soldier Field into a park as being like a net positive because there would be more green space on the lake than there is now, because you're turning parking lots basically into a stadium and a stadium into parks. So there's less parking lot and more park. But Friends of the Parks has seemed skeptical about it. They successfully sued George Lucas, who has a lot more money than the McCaskies, to keep him from building his museum in Chicago. So we'll see. I'd be very surprised if it gets built in its current form, which, I mean, I don't know. As someone that likes the Bears, and that also likes football, I'm fine with, because I do not like the idea of a permanent dome in Chicago, and I don't think football should be played indoors.
Yeah, I mean, stadium design wise, I mean, a lot of people compared it to Allegiant Stadium in Vegas, that it's basically a copy paste with some orange highlights. And I mean, I agree, first of all, that it shouldn't be a dome. I like my outdoors. If anything, you know, I don't know, this is a whole other discussion, but like Soldier Field is ranked apart in both MLS and NFL list as some of the worst stadiums. And like Guaranteed Rate, or as I still call Comiskey, is also ranked near the bottom of MLB stadiums. So it's like, yeah, what they built wasn't great, but like, especially like right now, and like in this economy, I feel like this has been like the worst time to bring up like the idea of building a new stadium. I personally feel
right, because like the people that it helps are like, NFL tickets are expensive. If you can afford an NFL ticket, you are not hurting. You know,
no, genuinely. Like, I mean, I still haven't been to an NFL game mainly because of those ticket prices.
All right, Alan, I'll take you sometime this year.
I mean, I would love that first of all, because I've always thought about just like saving up and just going by myself, because I'm not going to force my friends to spend hundreds to go to a game. But like, yeah, that'd be fun.
They're long. It's a long time in person. Yeah.
And of course, to make this just like a little like your thought on this, if money, taxpayer or private, wasn't an issue, what would you guys prefer for all parties involved? So like for the White Sox, the Red Stars, the Fire, and the Bears, if you guys could choose the stadium situation, like how would you guys want?
Tim, go first, because Tim asks, or Alan asked me, so now it's going to take a minute. Tim, you go first, sir.
honestly, to some extent, I don't really care that much about the Bears and the White Sox. The White Sox, I think Comiskey is a much better stadium than it used to be. I honestly don't get the Comiskey hate. Like, I think that it had problems initially as a venue. I mean, I think now, like, the sightlines are good. It's easy to get to via the L, and there's good food. So, like, I don't know what else you want other than a competitive team, which has nothing to do with the building. For the Bears, I mean, honestly, to some extent, it's the NFL. They, like, there's money there. Like, screw them. They can figure things out. I think the big problem is the Comiskys are in this position where they don't want to do the thing that every other business in the world has to do if they don't have the money for something and they don't want to get out a loan to do it, which is every other company in the world. When that happens, you take on additional partners or additional capital to give you the money to do it. They don't want to do that because they don't want to sell shares in the team. They don't want to lose control of the team. And so instead they're asking taxpayers for help to build a stadium. They say, well, quote unquote, be publicly funded, even though it'll be publicly funded. I mean, or publicly owned rather, but like it'll be publicly owned technically, but they want all the revenue coming from events and stuff like that. So it just seems like a non-starter. So at this point, I'm sort of like, screw them. They can figure things out on their own. I hope that they don't get a dime from the taxpayers. The question for me is the Fire, and that I just don't know. Like, the team has had no indication about what they want to be doing or where they want to go. I mean, my dream would be, you brought up the Red Stars, who said they did want a home. A soccer-specific stadium shared between the two teams, I think could really work. Assuming that stadium on the 78 site doesn't get built. For the White Sox, that would be an ideal location. It's close to the L, it's close to downtown. I think a soccer stadium there would kill, and I think that automatically, just the additional visibility of the venue, it being a new venue, having some of the perks that like new stadiums, like soccer stadiums in this country have that Soldier Field does not, really could help, and I think would be an instant win for both Red Stars and Fire attendance, regardless of the on-pitch product.
Amen, I say to that, because that is essentially the same idea I had, that, what the Bears and what the White Sox do, regardless, new stadium or not, it's kind of, I also pretty much, I don't want to say I don't care, but I'm neutral to it. But if you look at other teams like St. Louis or like the newer MLS teams, especially like St. Louis, who have soccer specific stadiums very close to the city center. And like I said, like you said, sharing with the Red Stars would be perfectly fine, just like they did in days past in Bridgeview.
I mean, not even like perfectly fine. I think that there's synergy there. I think that it gets teams used to seeing soccer in one location, and I think it probably helps both teams get tickets.
Yeah, and it just being, like you mentioned, a new venue in the city center, it would definitely, and it be just being soccer specific would just help all parties, whether it's like actually filling the stadium and making the stadium better for fans and supporters, because I mean, it's difficult to to make the supporter section bounce even more when you have football chairs that are just stuck there in between, and it's all the rules.
The thing that kills me, also, this is off topic, but
that's fine.
The chairs are designed to be movable than removable at Soldier Field.
That's what I said. And it's like, wouldn't it make sense to just, when the Fire play, to just take them out and just make it, or literally take them out and in the same mounts put the safe standing, the rails that they use for
and
safe
those
standing.
Those exist for those same rails. Also, wouldn't it make sense to cover up the Bears logos on that signage board, the digital signage board on the first level, right by where you see the clock and stuff like that? There's Bears logos that are permanently there. They're not lit up. Why are we keeping the Bears? It just, and it not just it's maybe one thing if the Bears are playing there in a week or whatever, but I'm saying in March, April, there's no why are there Bears logos visible? There's more Bears logos. I tried counting at one point the number of Bears logos or related things I saw between walking up to the stadium to the time that you could get to a spectator seat at Soldier Field, and I couldn't count. Like, it was too many to count.
Yeah.
And it greatly outnumbered the number of Fire logos that I saw on a Fire game day.
All right. Well, DJ, help us wrap this up. What do you think?
Well, first things first. So for those that don't know, stadiums are kind of one of those things that make my brain tickle. And of course, for those that remember, Chicago bid for the Olympic Games about 16 years ago.
For the 2016 Olympic Games, yeah, in 2007, 8, yeah, was the bid. Yeah, and the vote was 2009. Yep.
Because Obama was president at that time. For those that don't know, that bid sucked. I don't think it can be put into words how bad they did with that bid. But the Olympic Stadium, if they could make a permanent version of that stadium for Soldier Field's replacement, I would be happy with that. Because that stadium on the lakefront would have been beautiful.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned that because the stadium was designed to be temporary and like dismantled after the games.
Exactly. So they can make a permanent version of that. Because I like that stadium. And if they can make like a retractable roof for it. Because I know the entire reason why there's the dome, the roof, is to make it so that the city can host events. I understand that. And I do agree with that to a degree. But yeah, you should also have an open stadium in Chicago. Because let's be real, there are fun games between the Packers and Bears in the snow. I'm not going to miss that.
Yeah.
Amen.
But with that said, if I want them to do that, but more importantly, they got to actually have the money for that, and I don't think they're going to have any luck with that in this regard.
Everything, yeah, you're right.
Everything that I can say pretty much is just going along the terms of, if you're going to convince people who are already paying so much money for everything else to pay more in taxes, you're not going to have a good time. Chicago Bears, they're not going to succeed in that.
Yeah. All right. Well, staying on the topic of Soldier Field, if I remember correctly, because I have short-term memory loss, in August, beginning of August, Aston Villa, they announced this like pretty much right after the Bears rendering thing, like maybe like a day or two after. They announced Aston Villa and Club America have announced that they're going to be doing a friendly at Soldier Field August 3rd, as Club America has stated it, a Leagues Cup showcase, which is this is a part of Aston Villa's summer tour where they're playing a few games in the U.S., including in Columbus against Columbus, in New Jersey against Red Bull, Leipzig, not New York Red Bulls, and of course Club America in Chicago. Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's interesting that this is, if I remember you saying, this is before their Leagues Cup start in.
It is, yeah. So like the Fire, it's the Fire play Toluca in Leagues Cup. It's technically a Toluca home game for some weird Leagues Cup reason, but it's happening at SeatGeek in Bridgeview on August 1st. Yeah.
So, this showcase for Leagues Cup is happening in Soldier Field while the Leagues Cup itself is happening at SeatGeek in Bridgeview. So interesting. We can all pretty much we pretty much know why, but
so that the team has more or less been forced to use SeatGeek for Leagues Cup because there's a bid book that sort of happens, and they do treat it like an international tournament where they've got to go investigate venues and stuff like that, and you're going to be like, here's our venue. They do an inspection, and they can't guarantee that Soldier Field will be available throughout the summer because of all the concerts and stuff like that that's happening. And then like later in the tournament, like college football games and potentially NFL preseason games. So
true.
There we are.
It's already such a congested schedule, at when the Fire are essentially third-rate tenants at Soldier Field, considering that not just the Bears have priority, but I'm also pretty sure that concerts and events also have priority over the Fire.
Yeah, anything, basically the Fire have priority within 8 months of things that they announce for concerts, but anything that's planned before that, they do not. Which really, like, given how long in advance concerts are, it's not great. Like, it just isn't a great home. And which again makes like the Fire's like lack of true backbone with the statement they made about like it's like the evolving stadium situation. You're like, okay, but like fans want to know when the team is going to feel like it has a home, because right now it does not.
Yeah. One other piece of news that's I guess on par with the stadium news was that the US and Mexico recently announced that they're abandoning their 2027 Women's World Cup bid, and that they're going to focus on 2031. The reason why, this is worth mentioning is because this would have been a chance for Chicago to host a World Cup game for the women's game this time. But, now it's being moved to 2031. And I mean, as we sort of discussed before the hand, we have no clue what the stadium situation is going to be in 2031, if anything goes through at all.
Right. Like, could it be that like Soldier Field is demolished, but like the new stadium's not ready? Like, would they consider a new stadium? Like, would they have this stadium ready in time for a bid book? Which, I mean, who knows? So,
true.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. But like 2031 could be better. In this statement, they argued for greater parity between the way that the men's and women's World Cups were treated. And so I kind of wonder if it's some of like the FIFA money that comes with hosting the World Cup. They're hoping that by 2031 they can make a case to get, more of it.
Yeah. All right. And I know this is a lot of news, guys, but we got just two more things to talk about, I guess, and we can go through them fairly quicker. Another one, this is our neighbors in Indiana. We recently played the Indy 11. Well, the Fire 2 played Indy 11 in the Open Cup. Recently, it was announced that Indianapolis are planning on an MLS expansion team, which does raise some eyebrows, especially since the Indy 11 recently announced that they're going to get a new stadium in Indy, which they broke ground like May of last year.
Yeah, but the progress hasn't been great, and then there were concerns about the cost to the taxpayer, basically that it wasn't going to be able to pay for itself. Still, it's kind of unfortunate. Indy 11 have strong sort of like organic support. Before the Indy 11
it's one of the
match,
biggest teams in like USL League One, or in the I keep forgetting.
Championship, yeah, USL Championship.
So that's even bigger, and they're like one of the bigger like staple teams of the championship.
Yeah, so before the Indy 11 Fire 2 US Open Cup match, I had a chance to speak to David Ziemba, who's the president of Brickyard Battalion, which is like sort of like the Section 8 of Indy 11. It's like the overarching like organization that worked with like other independent SGs. And he told me that they were really looking forward to the new stadium. And they had 1,000 people basically showing up in their supporters section every match, up to like 3,000 for some, or like 3,000 people would come in and out at different points. Like not everyone would be at every match, but it was at least 1,000, and they were overall like 3,000 strong, which is huge local support. They're not happy. David went on local TV to basically speak against the rumored MLS bid. It's worth saying when Indy 11 first came into the league in, I want to say like 2013, the plan was for them, supporters were told USL now, MLS by 2018. Obviously that didn't happen. But it is another case of like you mentioned San Diego,
Yes.
Alan, where essentially the San Diego Loyal were deleted from existence, and supporters groups were pissed and were eventually sort of like brought on side by some overtures from the front office. But again, this is all a rumor, and it seems to be about money. And it seems that part of the concern is the cost of that soccer specific stadium they're building and whether it'd be able to repay it, because the team really isn't contributing that much money for it. It's mostly public money. And this just goes to show how like politically volatile public money for stadiums is these days.
Yeah. So, it would be a shame for Indy if they were to suffer the same fate that San Diego did, which is that they lose a team that's already been cemented in the city and the people there, and they're essentially having to transfer to another team that, I mean, we wouldn't know what the identity is, but like based on what we're seeing in San Diego, you know, you got a team that has like really cool colors and a logo to a team that is now chrome.
Yeah. It's going to be Indianapolis Soccer Club or Football Club, and their logo will probably be a knockoff of, I mean, I don't know. What Premier League club hasn't had a knockoff MLS team yet? Aston Villa? Maybe they'll be Indy Villa. Yeah. Maybe they'll be they've already got the supporters group as the battalion, but that would almost seem like too much of an olive branch. They can't be like the Indianapolis Arsenal, because like with the battalion, it's like too close, and it's like you want to be interested, but you don't want to seem too interested, because like then yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a messed up situation. And it also seems like it's another stage in the, I don't know if Cold War is the right term, like mildly hot war, warm war between MLS and USL. Yeah, what's going on.
And yeah, so I mean, that's why we're mentioning it, because of course with the Open Cup, I mean, especially with the Open Cup and the fact that we played Indy 11, like they're neighbors to us essentially.
Yeah.
So,
and the other factor too is like a lot of, like a lot of people in Indianapolis, like they hate Ohio, like as a state, they don't like Ohio. So if you were in Indy or anywhere in Indiana as a state, and you were interested in soccer and you wanted to pick an MLS team, you'd pick the Fire, because like you weren't going to pick the team in Ohio, which was the Crew, and so a lot of people in Indy are Fire fans. So it could potentially, lose some Fire fans. On the other hand, it would give the Fire a very natural rival. So
that is true. But I mean, yeah. All right. Well, I know. Long news section. One last one, and this is solely based on the Fire. Tim, you can definitely take this one over. Total Soccer Show recently did an episode about the Fire. It wasn't in a good light. I will say that. Mainly highlighting like essentially the what went wrong, or what has been going wrong.
Yeah, so the Total Soccer Show does an episode once a week called The Big Thing, where they go into one topic in depth. The past week it was about the Fire. I know both those guys that were on it a little bit. I spoke to Joe Lowry about the, just basically like background information. I got a shout out, which was nice, but not necessary considering which is like low level background that I was giving him. But basically the question they asked is like, how did the Fire get where they are from where they started? I don't think that anything in that episode would be like groundbreaking news for anyone that is listening to this podcast, but I think it just goes to show that the Fire's sort of like state is getting noticed, sort of like nationally, because they're like one of the larger soccer podcasts in the country. So I guess attention is good. It would be great if we were saying like this, everything is about to change, but I don't think anyone on this podcast is feeling that.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's more about like the fact that it feels like no matter what we do, we always get something wrong that ends up bringing us downwards, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah. And money, I think it's like, it was money up until Joe Mansueto bought the team. And then since then has been not a good roster build under Georg Heitz, I think is the conclusion, which is more or less my conclusion. I don't think it would surprise anyone.
I mean, it's a lot of people's conclusion. I mean, MLS Soccer, I can't remember which specific writer, when they were talking about like all the MLS teams and how they're standing, they're saying that they once again quoted that during Georg Heitz's time, the Fire have finished 11th, 12th, and 13th in the Eastern Conference, and that they are on course to finishing like as low, like 14th.
Yeah, that was Matt Doyle's. He does the armchair analyst.
Yeah, that's Matt Doyle.
Once a week. That unfortunately, I was thinking about writing a piece about sort of like a mid-season report card, like a quarter to a third of the way through the season, and that like 12, 13, 12, 13, 14, like joke was going to be in my piece, but now I can't use it. Oh well.
He just beat you to it. I'm sorry.
He's a great writer, so what can I say?
Yeah. All right. it's finally time to talk about the actual game. I know we've been talking 30 minutes about news and stuff like that, but let's talk about Atlanta at home.
So are you going to run us through all the goals first, or?
Yes, I'm going to run through all the goals. All right, guys, I just ran through all the goals. What do you think? We're such a comedic podcast. So anything apart from the goals that totally happened, biggest highlight, in my opinion, was the fact that Zach Thornton was added to the Ring of Fire, the first GK to be added to the Ring of Fire. There was this whole ceremony. I wasn't able to go to it, unfortunately, because I was working, because they did it before the game. But they did this whole ceremony. They gave him a coat with the Fire logo on it, adding him officially to the Ring of Fire during halftime.
And the ring.
And the actual ring. That's true. The ring. Can't forget the ring. Yep. Can't forget the ring. And during halftime, they did this whole, they showed a bunch of former Fire players giving congratulations and thanks, all while Zach was doing training and like different exercises with Chris Brady, which was like, man is being honored and he's still doing his job. So like all the glory. And they had the Fire Academy goalkeepers in full uniform and everything in the top level on the south side, where they have all the Ring of Fire members' names and numbers listed, and they end up pulling up the old cover to reveal the new one that included Zach's name on there.
Yeah, it was cool. It was meaningful. I was at the ceremony. It was great. Like, Frank Klopas was there. Peter Wilt, the initial, GM of the Chicago Fire, later GM and president of the Chicago Fire, and was more or less his time with the Fire ended just before Zach Thornton's did. So it was cool to see him give a speech. His wife was there. She was just adorably cute with how she was moved. And Zach was able to have some friends from high school that were able to come and attend. So it was just great to see. Great to see him honored, but it's also good to see the Ring of Fire revived. Talking about like the values of the club. And I think that a lot of Fire fans felt that they had more or less been ignored, if not officially discarded, in the latter years of the time when Ando Holdings owned the team. So it's good to see Joe Mansueto reviving the Ring of Fire. At a midweek press conference last week, Alex Calabrese asked Frank Klopas about who he thought could be next, like what names he thought could be added, and Klopas basically said he thought there were a lot, because the Ring of Fire is unique in that members get to vote on new members, but that they needed to figure out like how often they wanted to add people and that kind of thing. So it's good to see it being a live Hall of Fame, and it's great seeing Zach being in it, because he really had is a phenomenal goalkeeper. And his accomplishments really, I think, deserve to be celebrated.
Amen. I say to that. Did they, DJ, did they show any of like the ceremonies or any of like the highlights of that on the broadcasts?
If they did, it was before I got there, before I managed to get on the broadcast. Unfortunately, I was a little busy, so I was unable to watch the whole thing.
The team put out like a 90-second version of the, just like a condensed version of like showing some highlights from the actual presentation before the game, as well as the, youth academy goalkeepers unveiling the banner on social media. Like you can look for it on like the team's YouTube channel.
Yeah, definitely recommend watching it.
It's moving. Yeah. It's 90 seconds. It's great. It's good to watch. Yeah.
Amen. So congrats once again to Zach for all the amazing work he has done and continues to do for the Fire. All right. So moving on to the actual game, what happened on the pitch? First thing that was to notice, formation change. So Frank Klopas has moved away from the 4-2-3-1 that we're used to seeing to more of a 4-4-2.
Yeah, so I don't think that I think this is necessity being the mother of invention, though. I think it was because of injuries.
Yes, that is true, because a bunch of players were just out and unavailable. Marin Haile-Selassie was unavailable. Shaq was unavailable. I'm pretty sure Gaston also was unavailable. Like, just a lot of players were just not there.
Yeah. And so not having that many players in the midfield available. Guti was hurt. He was able to train with the team over the course of the week. So was able to rejoin the team in training, which Shaqiri was not. He was training on his own. So Guti started on the bench, but really they felt like he wasn't ready for starting minutes. And Federico Navarro had a knee injury, which turned out to be not as significant as expected after his first start of the season last match. So all of them out. Toby Salquist back, and Andrew Gutman making his first start at home for the Fire.
Yeah, we saw the return of Gutman, which honestly, I think he had a fairly decent game, honestly. So, I mean, all the glory to him for, coming back and being able to play in red in Chicago for the first time. All the glory to him. In a part of the change in formations, we saw two forwards. Instead of just it being Hugo Kuipers, we did see Kutsias being up forward. We saw the double pivot with Kellen Acosta and Mauricio Pineda moved up into the midfield. Herbers and Chris Mueller were on the wings, and then the back line, of course, of Aragoni, Salquist, Chihos, and Gutman.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that after playing Mueller on the right wing last week, which means that his weaker left foot is the one facing an end goal. And a lot of players have a weaker foot. I think it's fair to say the drop off between Mueller's good foot and his bad foot is more significant than you typically see.
That one shot Mueller had where the ball fell into his feet, and it could have, it was probably one of the best, oh my gosh, this could go in. And all of a sudden got rocketed out. Which foot did he try doing that? Was that his left foot?
That was his left foot, but you could tell that he felt like he didn't hit it right. And last week, he had two shots on goal on his left foot, and they were just a lot weaker and you could tell he was frustrated with it. So
yeah, you could tell that he was I
thought it was interesting that he started there again, especially because Herbers is capable of playing on the right. But there we are.
Of course, with the change in formation, especially with Kutsias being up forward with Hugo Kuipers, I mean, did it really help Kuipers? In my opinion, it's difficult. He's in just such either formation. I feel like in this game as well, he's being used too much in the role of playmaker, which removes him from, where he's supposed to be, he's supposed to be the guy that's in the right place in the right time in order to score goals rather than create them. So I feel like the current formations are just not helping him personally. I don't know what you have to say about that, Tim and DJ.
I think the problem for me too is he's not getting service. Any service he gets immediately goes to someone that's complete. If he gets the ball, he's surrounded immediately.
It's usually the services, like you mentioned, it's going to someone that is either not in red or not in white confetti red blue, essentially.
And it's he has to play defense now. They're almost treating him like the one problem that I had with Kamara last year was Kamara was one of our better defenders at times. And that's not good for your starting striker.
And part of that was that Kamara was tasked to go back and defend because Shaqiri was not. Shaqiri wasn't in the lineup for this match.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked in previous matches that Kuipers there was a game where he had more touches in our box instead of the opposition box. And he had he even had a clearance at one point that was very important.
And this game, he had, I thought, some decent hold-up play from a number of times. I'm just looking through my notes really quick, and it's Kuipers pressures Guzan, Kuipers hold-up play, Kuipers plays the ball into Fabian Herbers in the box. It's him doing a lot of connecting and not him
finishing,
being asked to be at to be at the end of the connection.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the formation change, like you mentioned, it's mainly for the necessity of injury, but I feel like it's something that should still be looked at even when injury players do return. Because I feel
speaking on the other side of it, I thought Kutsias, we've seen, he did, I thought, some good work on the ball, or with the ball, and he did a good job, I think, advancing the ball, getting into some dangerous areas, including like working it with like skillful dribbling. That's the second match in a row that he's done that. And so I thought that was impressive. I'm seeing more to his game than I did last year.
That is true. And I do like the idea of Hugo Kuipers having a second forward with him, whether it's like more like a false number 9 or just an additional playmaker. Tim, you probably know this. Has Hugo played how many times has he played a full 90 minutes? Because I feel like a lot of times he gets subbed off for like Tom Barlow for a lot of games.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the plan is that like you expect your striker to be running a lot more. And so you give him, it's a reassurance policy to the striker more than anything else of like, you can run your heart out and we will get you off when you're gassed, because, you know, at that point we'll have, you know, someone there to take the burden from you. I think that he's played 90 minutes. I believe this is the third time off the top of my head, looking it up. Yeah. So he played 90 last week against Atlanta. He played 90 against RSL. He played 90 minutes against Cincinnati, the first home match of the season. And every other time he's been subbed off, typically like somewhere in the 80th minute and stuff like that. Earliest was the 75th minute against Red Bulls.
Okay.
But so, like that's a game where he had to like he was running. Yeah. He was
running like that. Those teams were running against Red Bull. Yeah. Like we mentioned, there was no goals. There was not really, I mean, in terms of chances, like we mentioned there was a Kutsias shot that went off the crossbar. At one point, I thought it went in. Like I saw the net rustling on the other side of the pitch, and I generally thought it went in. And then I saw the ball fly out, and I was just like, did the net defy the laws of physics and like push the ball back? And then they showed a replay that it bounced off the crossbar.
Yeah, it was close. That was in the 8th minute, I think.
Yes, it was very early on. And then Atlanta had like a few shots. I think they also had like a cross or like a woodwork hit at some point.
I don't know if they had a woodwork hit in the 24th minute. They had a ball that made it in the back of Brady's net. But
it was called offside. It was
ruled offside, yeah. Yes. Which it was. Like, again, they were just like, it was called offside immediately. Then they did review it, but the call in the field stood.
Yes. And then there were a few chances that Brady has once again earned himself not just the MVP of the match, but also he earned himself a spot on MLS's Team of the Match Day starting 11. He's earned himself a spot on that list.
And what's absolutely crazy about the whole thing is one of those was a save that he parried like low. He was, you know, just like got a glove on the ball while he was in the air, like low and on the right hand, like his right hand side of the net. And it wasn't called a shot on the pitch. So when the ball went out, it was given as a goal kick, not a corner. And so you see Gonzalo Pineda, Atlanta's head coach, just like going ballistic on the side of the bench because he can't believe that it's being given as a goal kick and not a corner. We asked Brady about it afterwards. He's like, oh, no. I definitely saved that. And it's kind of funny because the highlight reel that the team sent out afterwards, like that was the first highlight they like saved that they showed, but it was not listed as a save because I don't know.
Yeah. Also going back to the woodwork thing, looking on SofaScore, which is the app that I usually check for like scores, it does said that both teams had one woodwork hit. So I think there was a moment where Atlanta did hit the post in some way. I don't know. It might have been insignificant, or a bit definitely less significant than Kutsias making the crossbar do a hefty shuffle. So,
but yeah, I think that Kutsias did some good work. I don't think that he looked incredibly goal dangerous. You know, Kuipers, like, again, he didn't really seem that dangerous in the box, but he wasn't ever on the end. Like, he created more for Kutsias at the end of things in the box than he had himself, which is a problem, I think, maybe. Like, you'd maybe want to reverse that. I don't know.
And another two players I want to highlight are the two left and right backs, being the left right backs of Andrew Gutman and Alan Aragoni. I felt like they've been just continuously showing their worth ethic when it comes to creating plays or like starting plays from either our third or the midfield going into the final third. It's just like we mentioned, it's those final services or those passes. I feel like they're either just not quick enough, either the players that are supposed to be getting into the box at the moment that either of them starts running forward, or that they just immediately slow down and they do take a decent amount of time. One player. Yeah,
I thought that he did a good job. Like this was Gutman's first start since coming back from the injury that he sustained in this season opener against Philly, and I thought he looked good. He looked
minute as well.
Yeah, so basically the first time that he's ever really played in a Fire uniform, and I thought that he looked good. He almost had a goal like on two separate occasions in the like 61st and 65th minutes, including the one in the 65th minute where it was a header off the back of his head, which I haven't seen before. It looked deliberate. I asked him about it afterwards, and he said he thought there was a chance he could angle it the right way if it was perfect and it was worth a shot. But he did tell reporters that he thought he was going to start doing better when he got more comfortable reintegrating with the team. But I thought that he had a really strong performance and that he outplayed anyone that we've had in that position in a very long time. Like, no offense to, especially like Alan Aragoni, who was like subbing in that position, I thought was good and looked a lot better back in his natural right side.
Yes. Amen. I say to that. One player, unfortunately, when it comes to injury, is Tobias Salquist. So he sustained an injury late in the game. I'm pretty sure this was like in second half extra time.
Stoppage time. Right? Yeah, it was
second.
Like about a minute or so into stoppage time in the second half.
And since this happened on the opposite side of the field, I didn't see what happened.
Which
I can't
is good.
remember if they ended up. I remember seeing Joe Chach's tweet saying don't look it up. Yeah, don't look it up. They ended up having to stretcher him off, which is like, oh dear. And the Fire since then had to play the remainder of stoppage time with just 10 men.
Because Klopas, even though the team hadn't used 5 substitutions, he'd used all 3 of his windows.
Yeah.
And
so,
and also, a couple, also in second half stoppage time, or actually in the 80 something minute, it looked like Brady was working off an injury and he had to get attended to for a couple of minutes. He was able to continue and he said he was fine afterwards, but that would have been difficult if the team.
We ended up going into like the 100th minute. They had to like show like the full time on top of the scoreboard since the timers at Soldier Field only show 2 digits. So
some of them do, some of them go to over 100. It's bizarre. I don't know.
Well, the 2 that are underneath the jumbotrons don't.
Yeah.
So they had to show it on the actual screens instead. It's just a shame.
It's honestly. Really rough. It's really rough for Salquist. And Dax McCarty was the player that it basically made contact after playing the ball with Salquist's leg. McCarty had the former Fire player.
Former Fire captain.
Yeah. No intention whatsoever to cause any harm. And really the only way, like, it looked like innocuous from where I was in the press box a ways away, but when I saw it initially, it didn't look that bad. The way I knew it was bad was that Dax was standing over Toby and like waving to the referee to get his attention that he was down and he was hurt. So no ill intent with the injury. It's one of those unfortunate things that happens when you have people running as fast as they do, as hard as they do. And no update on how he's doing. We'll probably get something midweek or potentially later, but I would be surprised if he's back anytime in the next few months for the Fire.
Yeah. Take all the time he needs, especially, based on what I'm hearing and like the words that people have said to describe what has happened.
And I feel really bad.
Oh, sorry.
it was Dax McCarty that injured him, and Dax couldn't do anything about it. Because brilliant tackle by Shihos, and Dax just fell directly onto Salquist. And it's like, you feel bad for everyone involved because it wasn't like, oh, Dax made a really bad tackle. It was Dax fell over.
Yeah, no intention whatsoever. I mean, it wasn't even like him making a bad decision of like playing the ball the wrong way or something like that. Like Dax had no awareness whatsoever that that's where Salquist was and no ability to stop it, even if he was aware.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure Dax had no ill intention. So,
and again, like credit, just like, you know, we know this about Dax anyways from like the time that he spent with the Fire, but as soon as he saw what was going on, he was standing over Salquist and he was waving to get the referee's attention, even while play was ongoing. Like, it just shows why he, you know, really is just like the player that has absolute class that we know that he is.
Yeah, man, I miss him. I still remember when I got to meet him all those years ago. All right. There's one other player that I just want to quickly highlight, and that is Kellen Acosta. There's been a lot of comments about his performance, a few giveaways. I mean, the Fire in general are the team that leads to like errors, that leads to shot/goals. But I feel like Acosta is someone that's doing the opposite, like him making like he gets the ball instead of giving away. And I feel like it was the opposite for that game.
I don't know. I thought that he had a pretty poor game on the whole. I mean, he was dispossessed easily in the midfield. Now, like obviously Atlanta has a pretty strong midfield when you look at like guys like
Almada.
Yeah, well that's one. He wasn't so much doing the dispossessing, he was just doing the dismantling of lines. But like Tristan Muyumba, I'm going to say his name wrong. I'm sorry, Alan. Bartosz Lich, but
Not
both
bad.
of them. Yeah. How close was I? Give me a scale.
I would say an 8.
All right, I'll take that.
Yes. If anything, the SZ at the end is like a sh. So Bartosz Lich.
Bartosz Lich. Okay. All right. This
Who did get a yellow card at one point? And I was like, the Pole got a yellow.
Comedy and Polish language podcast.
Amen.
It just seemed like it wasn't his game. I mean, he did have a couple of good plays into the box. I don't think any were great. But it seemed like he was outplayed a couple of times, and he certainly was earned some discussion from the referee with some of the, you know, like off-ball movement and stuff like that he had. So I don't know. DJ, do you have thoughts?
I think Acosta's having the same problem as Kuipers, which is Acosta's used to playing with LAFC, and now he has to play with.
Yeah.
It is worth saying though, like playing out of a 4-4-2 is a little bit different, but his partner in the midfield was Mauricio Pineda at the start, and actually throughout the match. And I thought that Pineda had a really strong game and showed more of his ability as an offensive threat than I think a lot of Fire fans have seen for a while. Like I haven't really seen this from him since when he was playing with the U.S. men's youth national teams a few years ago, because he can be an offensive creator and he has that club in his bag. And I think this is his first start in the midfield. And I mean, I don't even know how long, but I thought he had a pretty solid game next to Acosta.
Yeah. I normally prefer Pineda as a center back to him as a defensive midfielder, but in this game he definitely had, or like in just midfield in general, but I definitely think he did have a better game. And I know someone like gave a stat that like we don't concede when Pineda's playing. Someone put out that stat. I can't remember if I'm saying it right.
I think it's when he's playing in the 6. So when he's playing in the midfield, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Pineda, I want him to start every game now that Salquist is going to be gone.
I mean, hey, it might happen. I'm not sure what's going on with Carlos Terán, so we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
A lot of injuries, and it's a factor. It would be a factor in any club, but especially MLS size rosters, big factor.
Yeah, we all know about MLS roster rules and all that fun stuff. So after this game, the Fire are now in 12th in the Eastern Conference. They have 10 points out of 10 games, so they're only averaging a point per game. That's, I mean, if you want to get playoffs, that's not good at all.
It's
kind of a no-no.
It's also worth saying that, like, when last year Ezra Hendrickson was fired after 10 matches, after the loss to Nashville, at that point the Fire had 11 points in 10 games. The Fire have 10 points this year. They've conceded 2 more goals. They've scored 2 fewer. So I don't think this is Frank Klopas' fault, by the way. But this is happening when theoretically, like, the thing that everyone was saying last year was that they needed a better striker. And they went and spent $12 million to bring in a team record signing in Hugo Kuipers. So they've got a better striker. They're scoring fewer goals and getting fewer points so far.
It's the problem of whenever we fix one area, an area that wasn't broken all of a sudden falls apart. And it's something I've said in the last few episodes that last season, the Fire had the problem of we can create services, but we can't create proper chances. Now it's we can't create services to get those proper chances. Like, the problems have switched, essentially. We had a decent midfield creating those chances. We just didn't have as many good forwards to finish on those chances. Now we have decent forwards, or really great forwards technically by monetary value, but we just can't get any services. The problems have flipped. And on top of the fact that with a defensive line that felt fairly solid in the last few seasons, all of a sudden, like creating their own problems, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, to be honest, I think the midfield still has issues structurally. Like, I don't think that the Fire have had a creator that is good enough. That one of the challenges for this year for Brian Gutierrez, who was not fit enough to start, so we'll give him that. But hadn't started the past couple of matches due to fitness. He was slated to start last week, but was unable to because he picked up an injury in pre-match warmups. The challenge was, like, can he be good enough to really be an MLS level starting number 10 in a league where, like, you've got Lionel Messi, who you're not going to compete with because he's Lionel Messi, and so, like, he's the GOAT. But I mean, in a league where, like, the standard for a number 10 is guys like Evander in Portland, or like Carl's Heel in New England, who we're going to be talking about in a second. Like, and it doesn't seem like he's taken that step forward as being that starting level, like taking the bull by its horns, like creator. And so the Fire have lacked that. I mean, there's other problems with the roster, but what can you do?
Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like we can now move on. So once again, we face off against the New England Revolution, this time in Soldier Field, another NFL stadium which an MLS team plays.
But this one has grass.
But that's true. We have grass. Get dunked on, New England fans. But the Fire are welcoming bottom feeders, New England Revolution, who are in last place, like, at all in the entirety of MLS, not just the Eastern Conference, for the second time. We've drawn them 1-1 in the end of March. Their current record is 1-7-1 with 4 points. Last 5 games, they only have 1 win, 4 losses. Their last points, if I remember correctly, was a win against Charlotte.
Yep.
But in the 4 games afterwards, they have been,
or 3 games afterwards, I think.
Or 3 games afterwards.
Yeah, because I think that we had that draw, and then there was the win against Charlotte, and then they haven't won since.
Yes. And since then, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think, games have been draws. No joke. Let me count that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Wait, between 6. The Fire and the Revs?
Yep.
That seems right.
6 draws. 1-1, 2-2, 3-3, 1-1, 0-0, 2-2. A lot of draws.
Okay, so If there's any code breaker listening to this podcast, you can tell us the next score because I think that Alan just told you one.
The numbers, Tim, what do they mean? Okay, so Chicago has apparently a 48% chance to win, 25% chance to draw. Their last game was a 1-4 loss in front of a record crowd of 65,000 against Miami. So now you know the reason why there were 65,000 people in Foxborough for a New England Revolution game, because normally the only time you would get those numbers if the Patriots were playing.
So the match started off really well for Miami, or for the Revs against Miami. They scored in the first minute, and then I don't think they got a shot on goal until like, I don't know, sometime deep in the second half. Like I watched that entire match, and like it was not a lot of New England that we saw. It just became Miami doing Miami things. I'm not sure that you really want to read too much into that because it's Miami doing Miami things, but it's more the form that they've showed in the other matches that I'm going to read into because that's probably more indicative. Where they just like haven't really looked like a convincing team. And it seems like it's been like a litany of excuses where it's like, oh, like Caleb Porter, the head coach they brought in this year because he has a history of like winning with MLS teams. And like, when you look at like the player ages on the Rev squad, it's a lot of guys that are like there, but you don't think are going to be there that much longer. Like they're like in the prime, at the end of their prime, like that kind of thing. And it's like, oh, well, we're in CONCACAF Champions Cup. And then it's, oh, well, we have a CONCACAF Champions Cup hangover. Or like legitimately before the match, Caleb Porter said that he didn't want players that were wowed by Messi to be in the lineup. And then he said that there were like a bunch of players with the flu that couldn't play.
Wow.
So it's like, I mean, maybe that's an excused absence. Like, I don't know. Do we sign permission slip? But it just hasn't been great from the Revs. But that makes it like, DJ, you were saying this is a much win. And
this is a must dominate game, honestly. If the Fire cannot come out, Fire cannot win like they did against Montreal, which is the only thing that got them that victory was an act of God himself. They have to win this game and dominate it over the Revs. End of story.
Like, this can't just be a win. It can't be like a 1-0 win, like where we barely scrape by. It has to be a win.
This has to be the Fire, like, it can end at like a 1-0 or 2-0 if New England's goalkeeper goes off, but it's gotta be a victory, and they've gotta show that they can dominate a game, especially against a team that's playing like Toronto from 2013.
yeah, I mean, that's actually, it's funny that you mentioned the goalkeeper because like the one thing that the Revs have had for like really years has been through multiple goalkeepers. Like, you know, they had Matt Turner, they had Georgi Petrovic after that, like both of whom just were able to dominate matches. And then now they like for the first time in years, they like have a goalkeeper that is not really a difference maker. Like he's fine, I guess. Like he's okay, but
Not like our goalkeeper.
Exactly. No, he's no Chris Brady. Heinrich Ravas is no Chris Brady, and I think that's fair to say.
Right.
But like that's been a big difference. But I mean, you're right. Like both of you are like, this needs to be a win. I mean, one for the points. Like the Fire really needed 6 or 7 points out of this 9-game homestand. Now they have 1. They can get up to 4, so they need at least the 4. But it's been 282 minutes, of competitive soccer since the Fire have scored a goal.
I feel like we've been here before.
Yeah. No, like, and this has become
Very
a trend
recently.
This has become a trend under like, and I don't know what it is. Like under Frank Klopas's Fire teams of these like long stretches of not scoring, the Fire have 1 goal in open play in their past 5 matches. Like these are not great numbers. And when you look at the Fire's lineup, when you look at the people that are showing up, they should be scoring more than 1 goal every 5 games in open play. Like, and you also can't really expect to be anywhere in standings or anything else if that's your performance, right? Like, And
you win games by scoring goals.
Yeah, I understand that's pretty important. I'm not like a coach or anything. But
I wouldn't know anything about music major.
Yeah. Well, so you've got the measure and the rhythm, which I think that is one of the things that
it is the rhythm. That is true.
But
it's the tempo.
But
as well.
I mean, realistically, like the Fire need to win. I mean, like the way they win doesn't really matter that much, but I think that for the purpose of narrative, just for the purpose of like fans that are going to games, like when you score a goal, like 1 game out of 5, like it makes it more difficult to make the case that like this is a fun experience for fans, right? So
yeah,
they need to score goals because goals are fun. Like we like goals. Like I don't know.
I mean, the last game against Atlanta, the crowd was actually pretty cool. I mean, there was a reported 18,000 at Soldier Field. It low-key felt like there was a bit more. I personally felt like the supporter section was bouncing at like legitimately. I felt the ground underneath me like going up and down, like shaking, which I don't think I remember the last time when that's happened at a Fire game. So that was pretty cool. I mean, of course, there were comments, as there usually is, in terms of the unity of the supporter section. That's a long-term fix. So, but you have to start somewhere. And, you know, scoring goals will help. And it'll help bring people in. And especially now, since May is when we have our homestand, when we actually have decent weather and decent amount of home games. Because once the actual summer rolls in, we have like what, 1 game in June?
Yeah.
It's game in July, game in August, not counting Leagues Cup though.
And you quoted those numbers of like a 48% chance to win. I mean, to some extent, MLS teams on average win about half their home games. They win maybe a quarter on the road and the rest are draws. Like that just is like a league-wide average. And so every single time you drop points at home, that just means you've got to do something that is harder, not quite exceptional, but harder to do, which is get points on the road.
It's not impossible, but with the Fire especially, it's improbable.
Yeah, and I mean, any way you put it, even if the Fire are able to get 3 points against the Revolution, which they absolutely should be able to do. I mean, against this team that just looks like it's not just about the players, although, I mean, a little bit is about the roster composition. And
I was about to say, with these roster rules, it's kind of a bit more about the players.
Yeah, and like, is like Ravas really like an MLS level goalkeeper? Like, they keep on gambling on goalkeepers. It's like they roll the dice and they've won every single time. And
they get crit fails every single time.
Except for this time, when they did not. So, you know, it's a very winnable game for the Fire, but like they just need points. I mean, like legitimately getting 3 points puts them on the level to be like a ho-hum playoff team. And that's after a number of home games that really should have had more points in them.
Amen, I say to that. All right. DJ, do you have any other thoughts on this game?
If the Fire don't come away with at least a victory and dominate the game, then there's zero reason for Klopas or Heights to still be in their positions after the game.
Well, we'll get into this at some other point potentially, but I honestly
I know this is something that Hot Takes will be discussing thoroughly.
Heights is Heights, but I mean, Klopas, the Fire have had 3 managers under Heights, and the results have been very much the same. So,
like maybe we said, 11, 12, 12, 13.
Yep. Don't call for the manager.
I just say Klopas for one reason, and that's because at this point, if you get rid of Heights, there's no turning the season around, and I don't want Klopas's reputation to be soiled more than it already is.
All right. This was definitely a a big episode. A lot of news, a lot to talk about on both sides of the game's preview and review. So, ladies and gentlemen, and they thems of the fire, thank you again for listening to this wonderful episode of the Bonfire. Any last words of wisdom to depart with?
Go watch Cocaine Bear.
I've not seen that. I've heard things about it. I've heard like that. I've heard mixed things about like what is this that I'm watching essentially?
I think the movie is probably one of those movies that if you go watch it, you should watch it while you're so drunk you can barely stand, or you're so high you can barely stand. That's probably the type of movie that it is.
So you mean do what Cocaine Bear, I'm assuming, would do.
Which is just eat a whole bag of cocaine.
Eat a bag of cocaine.
We are not endorsing to do that. We are not endorsing those activities.
I'm not saying you should do drugs. I'm just saying if you do, buy them from me.
Okay. Before we get any more in trouble, the only thing I will say is I will also recommend something to watch, and that is the new Fallout series. It is actually really good, and it has definitely brought back my Fallout obsession. Anything else to recommend for our audience, Tim?
I feel like people can make their own viewing decisions.
I mean, hey,
no, Tim, we are always use a little.
As the Beatles used to say, I get high with a little help from my friends.
Yeah, fair enough.
We are trying to manifest some sponsorships.
One thing I will say is, watch the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinal between Rayados and the Columbus Crew, because that match should be good. They're two of the best coaches in the region, if not the hemisphere, playing against each other, and Columbus so far has the edge. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Wow. Watch soccer. We are a soccer podcast, so that does make sense in comparison to what me and DJ said. All right. We have fun here on the Bonfire, and I hope you guys do too, especially for this episode. As always, I'm Alan the Pole with the Goal, joined by my loveliest of co-hosts, Tim and DJ. And as always, when we're up and when we're down, come on,
Red.